Before we begin the formal part of the program, I want to remind everybody to please turn off your phones if you have not already done so. And when I say off, I think we can all agree that a phone going off during this program would be a little inappropriate. So please make sure your phone will not be going off in any way, no matter how somebody contacts you, will not be going off during the show, during the program this evening. As is noted at the very bottom of the program, I want to thank in advance all of the participants who are listed here. I want to thank recipient Adam Rosen for taking a significant role in helping organize this evening, Lana Sternberg and Mike Harrison for all of their contributions as well. And I want to thank Maria Benko in absentia, who was the spearheading coordinator behind the program this evening, who wanted to make sure that there was a Yom Hashoah program in the shul of significance and put in a lot of time and effort, but due to scheduling was unable to be here as she and Jeff are on the way back to New York. I'm going to begin with the chapter of Tehillim, Psalm 23. You can repeat along with me, or you can just listen. I'm going to read it in Hebrew and in English, and then give my opening remarks before turning over the lectern to Adam Rosen. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai Ro'i Lo Echsar. Binos Deshe Yar Bitzeni Al Mei Menuchos Inahaleni. Nafshi Shovei V'Ancheni B'Magli Tzedek L'Man Shemo. Gam Ki Elech B'Geit Salmabes Lo Ira Ra Ki Ata Imagi Shivtecha U'Mishantecha Hema Yinachamuni. Aroch L'Fanai Shulchan Neged Sorarai Yishantev Hashem and Roshi Kosi Rivaya Achto B'Chesed Yirnefuni Kol Yimei Chayai Yishavki B'Beis Adonai L'Orech Yamim. A Psalm of David, Hashem is my shepherd, I shall not lack. In lush meadows he lays me down, beside tranquil waters he leads me. He restores my soul. He leads me on paths of justice for his name's sake. Though I walk in the valley overshadowed by death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in full view of my tormentors. You anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and may I dwell in the house of Hashem for long days. This evening we are gathered to commemorate Yom Hashoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, and we have a different kind of program tonight, largely featuring the youth of Anshe Chesed, and of course our chief speaker is not a Holocaust survivor herself. I'll introduce her right before her speech, but is a child of Holocaust survivors. And while there are many Holocaust survivors still living today, as we all know, as time takes its toll, the numbers dwindle every year. And so it becomes a mixed message that we have to try to convey. On the one hand, we always want to give honor to the survivors who are alive, but on the other hand, we have the mantra of never forget, and in a sense, life has to move on, and life has to move on with strength. I'm sure that many of you saw a video which was made in Israel from a program called Ulam, which featured 600 people, some of whom are survivors, and their children and their grandchildren, singing a beautiful rendition of Chai Chai Chai, Kein Ani Otai. If we have time, we'll show it tonight. If not, you can certainly find it on the internet and on YouTube. And that is a very important message that we have to carry with Yom Hashoah. That when we look at 600 people, many of whom are the descendants of survivors, living in the land of Israel, and with strength, and looking forward to the future, and what their grandparents, those who went through hell and emerged strong enough to rebuild families, and what they were able to do and accomplish, that is a beautiful message for the future. So tonight we're going to do a little bit of the past, but we also have to think about a different aspect of the future, which I only became aware of today when I was thinking about what I was going to present to you this evening. There is an organization called the Claims Conference. The Claims Conference has as their mission the following. Across 6 decades, our mission has been to provide a measure of justice for Jewish Holocaust victims, to provide them with the best possible care. Going forward, we must ensure that future generations learn the lessons of the Holocaust, to preserve the memory of those who suffered so much and those who were lost. We know the horrors of the Holocaust can never be repaired and must never be forgotten, and we believe survivors of the Holocaust deserve recognition for their suffering and to live out their lives with dignity. I think I can't imagine anybody would disagree with that. The Claims Conference just released a survey which shared some good information and good news and some very disturbing information as well. So I have in front of me a number of different statistical charts, and I want to share with you what they say, and then I'll draw my comments to a close. The first list which they have here says the following. Holocaust awareness. 22% of millennials are not sure what the Holocaust was. 11% of U.S. adults do not know what the Holocaust was. Millennials are people who were basically who grew up in the last 25 years, or 30 years. Chart number 2. These are the numbers of people who believe that 2 million Jews or fewer were killed in the Holocaust. 41% of millennials believe that, and 31% of U.S. adults. Chart number 3. Countries where the Holocaust occurred, 84% of the people, of U.S. adults, think that it occurred only in Germany. 37% included Poland. 6% mentioned, or fewer, mentioned a few other countries in Europe. Ability to identify concentration camps or ghettos. 45% of U.S. adults can't name one. 49% of millennials can't name one. The ability to identify Auschwitz. Unable to identify Auschwitz, 41% of U.S. adults couldn't identify it. 66% of millennials could not identify Auschwitz. In terms of having a personal connection to the Holocaust, 80% of U.S. adults have never visited a Holocaust museum, and 66% do not know or know of a Holocaust survivor. Just a couple more. The good news is that as far as education goes, the percentages are very high in terms of the need for education. But obviously, even with that agreement, there's still a severe lackage. The identification of Auschwitz as a concentration camp. 40% of U.S. adults agree that it was a concentration camp. 23% say it was a death or extermination camp. 1% say it was a forced labor camp. And all that is fine and good in terms of knowledge, or not so good. But 41% are not sure, they gave an incorrect response when asked to identify what Auschwitz was. So we have our work cut out for us in terms of Holocaust education. While the numbers are strong in terms of the need for Holocaust education, we understand that the further and further we get away from it, I wonder if those numbers will continue to stay high or if they will continue, unfortunately, to dwindle. And that is why we are here. That is why tonight our program features young people, features children, teenagers, who are here to share with us what they have learned, and also to help us educate all of us, and including their siblings or their younger peers who are here. And I want to applaud the parents who brought your kids this evening, because you're in the right place tonight. And you're shakowak for being here as well. So our job, I think we all know, anybody who comes to a Holocaust program is well aware of what we have to do. We have to remember, because the world is a very tumultuous place. And the way things are going now, while we like to say never again, and we like to believe that with a strong Israel and strong Israeli defense forces, never again will always be true. But there are places in the world where evil exists in the hearts of tyrannical individuals, leaders, and if they could do it again, it's unfortunate, but in a heartbeat they will. So that's why we are here tonight, to lay the claim and to remind ourselves how loud and how strong we must be in remembering what was, what kind of people lurked in the hearts of despicable, terrible people, and of course to remember the strength of those who managed to pull through and create a generation of Jews who are looking forward to what should only be a bright future.
We're going to proceed with the candle lighting ceremony, and I'm going to call up either children or grandchildren of victims of the Holocaust, and they will in turn announce for whom they will be lighting their respective candles. Izzy Gable. Malka Henlish.
This candle is for my grandparents on mother's side, father's side, aunts and uncles I never met, and cousins.
Sylvia Zeltzer.
Being lit for my grandparents, for my parents who were both survivors, and for my aunts and uncles who never made it out, one of which I was named after.
Davy Zeltzer.
Grandparents on both sides, aunts and uncles, number of dozens. So, I don't know.
Ellen Frankel.
For my parents, their parents, brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles.
I'm going to light the remaining light in honor of the people who have members of the family who perished or who were survivors who couldn't be here tonight. Also on my father's side, my paternal grandmother is the oldest of 7 children, and only she and the youngest of 7 made it out.
Amalek. We are commanded to remember what the nation of Amalek did to us in their attempt to annihilate the Bnei Israel as they left Egypt.
Zachor, remember.
Amalekites are descendants of Esav. Haman was a descendant of Esav. The Nazis, Yamach Shemam, were all descendants of Amalek.
Zachor, remember.
Hamas is our present-day Amalek.
Zachor, remember.
How could we?
Only special children wear a star. I am a notice from near and far. They have placed a mark over my heart. I'll wear it proudly from the start. A star is a reward, so I've been told. This custom passed on from days of old. I know all that the star is revealing, but I'll try to have a better feeling. I am a star.
Papa told me to avoid trouble. Come home from school on the double. To me the star's yellow as gold. I'll try not to act so bold. I stand tall and proud. My voice shouts inside and loud. I am a real person still. No one can break my spirit, or I will. I am a star.
She didn't cry when they removed her clothes, her ring, her shoes, her hair. But when they took away her name, she wept. She became A6893.
This is dedicated to the memory of a 13-year-old hero of the resistance.
When I was 13, I became bar mitzvah.
When I was 13, I became bar mitzvah.
When I was 13, my teachers taught me to put tefillin on my arm.
When I was 13, my teachers taught me to throw a hand grenade with my arm.
When I was 13, I studied the pathways of the Bible and the roadways of the Talmud.
When I was 13, I studied the canals of Warsaw and the sewers of Vienna.
At my bar mitzvah, I took an oath to live as a Jew.
At my bar mitzvah, I took an oath to die as a Jew.
At my bar mitzvah, I blessed God.
At my bar mitzvah, I questioned God.
At my bar mitzvah, I lifted my voice and sang.
At my bar mitzvah, I lifted my fists and fought.
At my bar mitzvah, I read from the scroll of the Torah.
At my bar mitzvah, I wrote a scroll of fire.
At my bar mitzvah, I wore a new tallit over a new suit.
At my bar mitzvah, I wore a rifle and bullets over a suit of rags.
At my bar mitzvah, I started my road of life.
At my bar mitzvah, I began my road to martyrdom.
At my bar mitzvah, family and friends came to say l'chaim.
At my bar mitzvah, Rabbi Akiva and Trumbullor, Hannah and her 7 sons came to escort me to heaven.
At my bar mitzvah, they praised my voice, my song, my melody.
At his bar mitzvah, they praised his strength, his courage, his fearlessness.
When I was 13, I was called up to the Torah. I went to the Bima.
When he was 13, his body went up in smoke, his soul rose to God.
When I was 13, I became bar mitzvah and lived.
When he was 13, he became bar mitzvah and lives now within each of us. I believe in the sun, even when it is not shining.
I believe in love, when feeling it not.
I believe in God, even when you're silent.
Everyone can join in the singing of Animani. Animani, Temuna Shelema, Iyad HaMashiach, Animani, Animani, Temuna Shelema, Iyad HaMashiach,
Frankel. Helen is one of the founding board members of Next Generations. Since its inception 14 years ago, it has been her passion to retell a parent's story and to share her own experience as a child of survivors. In her role as chairperson for Next Generation Speakers Bureau, Helen has been a guest speaker for many schools and organizations. She is the eldest daughter of two Holocaust survivors from Poland. She grew up in Paterson, New Jersey, graduated from American University in Washington, D.C. with her degree in psychology. She and her family moved to Florida in 1991. Helen Frankel.
Hello. Good evening, and I just want to thank everyone here to celebrate this worldwide Holocaust Remembrance Day. And I'm honored to share my family's stories with you. Both of my parents are Holocaust survivors from Poland. And many of you know the stories. Today I spoke at work and to an audience like this that was 90% non-Jewish. So although we know these stories and they're ingrained in us and we celebrate them, and so many of these people that I work with every day had never heard of these stories. So that's why I'm here. When I think of who I am, in my soul, what truly defines me, it is that I am a child of parents that survived the horrors of the Holocaust. We, the children, as a group, are unique. We always knew we were different. We knew our parents were different. And I found this poem several years ago, and I would like to read it because I think it says it all. It's entitled, I Am. I am a child of Holocaust survivors. I wonder if I could have survived the horrors of Auschwitz. I hear the screams of frightened women and children as they are led to the gas chambers. I want to close my eyes and escape the nightmare. I am the child of Holocaust survivors. I pretend that my parents' trauma has no effect on me. I feel the vulnerability of being a Jew in an anti-Semitic world. I pray my children and grandchildren will not experience the horrors of hatred. I worry that evil and bigotry will not touch my perfect world. I dream of a world free of such hatred, discrimination, and craziness. I try to make a difference by helping to heal broken hearts and paralyzed souls. I hope that history will not repeat itself. I am the child of Holocaust survivors. Through our organization, Next Generations, those children and grandchildren of survivors have found a home to share and discuss our experiences along with the memories of our parents' trauma. Our organization has attracted many members who are not related to survivors, but are committed to our mission of stopping hatred and bigotry of any type, especially in today's climate of violent events. It is Next Generation's commitment to them and all that perished that keeps our organization moving forward. We continue to do this through education, seasonal events, special programs, and our Speakers Bureau. Over the past 14 years, we have connected with audiences on Holocaust-related subjects in schools, churches, synagogues, universities, museums, and community organizations. We have instituted a grant named in honor of our founder and president, Nancy Dershaw. The Nancy Dershaw Grant assists survivors in need here in our local area. Many survivors are elderly now and living, believe it or not, below the poverty line. The grant helps to provide funds for their basic necessities, such as medicine, medical and dental treatment, food, housing, utilities, and equipment. The funds are distributed directly through Albert Jewish Family Services and Ruth Rails Jewish Family Services of Palm Beach County. And now Next Generations has extended our reach into Broward and Dade counties as well. Recently, we have integrated another entity into Next Generations, the Gen Z Project. The vision of Gen Z is to educate and inspire children and young adults to take a stand against bullying, prejudice, and violence. Through story expressions of art, music, and photography, we are educating young people in schools and local colleges about the Holocaust. Tonight I will be showing our Telly Award-winning DVD, which is a compilation of oral testimonies from children of survivors, myself included, similar to Steven Spielberg's project, Shoah project of survivors' testimonies. The DVDs are used as educational resources utilized by teachers across the country and locally at FAU's Center for Holocaust and Human Rights Education. The DVD is represented by several children of survivors and their unique experiences in growing up with their parents. We, the second generation, are the direct eyewitnesses to their suffering, mourning, and trauma. But we are also witnesses to their great strength, their courage, their resilience, and uncompromised work ethic. But most of all, we, their children, have been the recipients of boundless love. We have become the replacements for all those that were brutally taken from them during Hitler's murderous regime. So now I'd like to show Next Generation's DVD, and hopefully we have all the logistics here.
Of generation to generation. This unique project, the oral testimony, is about the transference of trauma from our parents to us, as well as the strength and resilience of children of survivors.
You just didn't ask because you knew. And the details were not something anybody wants to talk about.
And I remember times when, you know, we'd be in the kitchen or something and I'd look at my mother and she would just be crying. And I didn't know why. You know, I'd say, you know, why are you so sad, or why are you crying, or whatever. And she said, you know, I'm just thinking about my parents, or, you know, something like that.
when they were first taken into the, with her parents and her sisters and her brother.
My father would talk a lot to me about his family and what happened, and he was in Auschwitz and his experience and how he survived at a young age. And sometimes those would be my bedtime stories. And that was his way, I guess, of telling it and having me remember.
I don't recall any teacher really showing an interest in, that we were from somewhere else. I don't think it was talked about the way it is today.
The main understanding of the Holocaust came in 1961, when I was 11 years old, where they had the Eichmann trial. Suddenly the whole country was hooked up to the few TVs. There weren't many TVs, but every neighbor opened his door to every other person to come and watch the trial. And I got attention by people asking me, the non-Ashkenaz, non-European Jews, by asking me, and I realized I better have good answers and real answers. And all I could have told them is actually what I saw on the TV the night before, if I watched.
And inside I would feel like, well, the teacher maybe is surprised or realizes that my parents are different, and could they understand them, and did my mother understand the teacher, and it always seemed to be fine. It was just more what was going on in my head.
It was talked about in a history class. We all learned, we learned what went on, but we were never asked to, let's say, stand up and say, where we were from and what we may have remembered. Nothing like that ever went on that I recall. I think there were times I probably felt sort of uncomfortable, and maybe I didn't really want a lot of friends coming over to my home, because my parents had this heavy accent, and they probably dressed differently than my friends' parents might have.
Then the overprotectiveness, something's gonna happen, I'm worried about you, God forbid something should happen, don't go here, don't go there.
I started to do extreme things, just to be part of everybody else, like climbing the highest tree or building, just to be accepted by the other kids, and not like the fragile one that my mother created due to her overprotecting.
And that, I think, was hard for my mother in particular to accept the fact that I became so independent at such a young age, as opposed to it meaning I'm rejecting. Okay, I think she took that as a sign that somehow I was rejecting her, as opposed to saying, I can't continuously live in that experience. I've got to get on with my life. And I was pretty consistent that way. And I think for it took her a long time to I think, accept the fact that I was like that. And she couldn't understand that. I never shared with her. I couldn't even verbalize it as I do now, that I made this decision.
But even as a young child, I remember thinking about them, and it worked in the other way as well, where I would develop fears. I developed a lot of fears about losing them. I just remember as a child, my father always talking a lot about his experience.
There was a section called Transnistria, which got that name during the Holocaust time. It never existed before. And that was a place where they took all the Jews, which my parents were included there, and made them work, labor work, anything for the German machine of war. And they will decide, you go for a distance of 10 or 20 miles by foot, and whoever made it, fine. Whoever didn't make it, they make sure once they hit the ground, a bullet in the head, and they kept going.
I knew my grandparents perished. I knew that my mother's 3 younger sisters perished immediately.
One of the most phenomenal story, basically, is they pushed him from one town to another. My mom supposedly gave up and fell on the side of the road and told my dad to leave her there. I think that was after they lost the kids and everything. She did not find why to go on. And he carried her. And I always heard that story. were sitting and talking, and I just like somehow heard the whole conversation. And suddenly I realized, wow, I had brothers and sisters, and it was a kind of a curiosity. And you try to relate it to some movies you saw, some other stories you saw. You don't really realize what it means until you can relate it to something.
I always, wish that I had met my grandparents and my aunts and my uncles and my cousins, but, that was something that was different too. When children would spend time with their grandparents, I would say, well, I don't have any, I don't know what that's like.
Out of about 100 distant family members on my mother's side, I would say a handful survived.
For example, amongst his stories, I'm sure that in some way that affected me, always figured out how to get things done, no matter what camp he was in. He's really quite the survivor, I'll use that term, simply beyond just surviving. He figured out how to survive. I think if I have a characteristic like him, that's one of them, is that you just sort of figure things out and you just keep going forward.
What I got from them as well was, that studying in school was the most important thing, that education was the most important thing, and to be kind to other people and make them, feel good about themselves and helping others, because that was really their personalities as well. So it was always there, but on their daily life and when they got together with other survivors, it was more they were celebrating life than mourning it. They would have their moments, and I think it was always there. And coming from what they came from as immigrants with nothing and no family and losing everything and no language, to raise their family, to be successful and well educated and instill the values that are so important. It's just a testament to why they survived and how they survived, and the legacy that their parents instilled in them when they were growing up has just been passed on to us. I always have said that we're like this tiny flicker of a flame that was supposed to be put out, and second generation now is having families of their own and thriving in different countries, not only here in the United States, but throughout the world. And I know that, their memories will live on through us and my children.
And I asked my father, how come you didn't stood up like we show in the movies and kill yourself with other Germans, taking them and kill them? And he said, because they will come back and kill more Jews, and I knew I'm going to have you one day. And even at that moment, it didn't hit me. As I go through life, that sentence is always in my head. My father stayed alive to give me life, and I've been giving that privilege to carry on that message of going on with life.
We hope that these interviews have created a deeper understanding for the experiences of children of immigrant parents and show that it is possible to achieve and be successful despite adversity. Ultimately, we hope that these interviews will inspire tolerance and respect for all people. To do this, Next Generations needs your financial support. Your support will help keep our voices alive for future generations.
Yes. Both of my parents were survivors from Poland. My father, a survivor of Auschwitz and the labor camp. My mother lived in hiding in the woods for nearly 14 months. The stories of their survival is incomprehensible even to themselves. Was it mere luck? Or survivor of the fittest? Or personal determination? Regardless of why, I am not supposed to be standing here before you tonight. Out of 300 family members on my mother's side, she and her sister were the only two that survived. On my father's side, he and his brother were the only ones, along with a handful of cousins. Their families had lived in Poland for over 100 years, were well-to-do business owners, not religious, and very assimilated into everyday Polish life. They owned properties, cars, motorcycles, good young adults from good families, and then everything changed. My mother was in her teens, and she told me of the time when she, in her town, which is now in Ukraine, when she remembers the German tanks coming through her town and not really believing that anything like this could happen. But life was going on, and a day or two went by and she had not seen her mother. She never came home. And she was in one of the first roundups, and then the ghetto started. My mother and her father and younger sister were in the ghetto, which, crazily enough, the apartment building that they owned was now part of the ghetto. So other families had moved in, and life was certainly much different. One night she heard a noise. She went downstairs in her nightgown and bare feet and saw the soldiers coming into the ghetto, and it was getting towards that liquidation time. They had known that things were getting really not very bad. She went downstairs, saw the soldiers, and could no longer go back upstairs to her family. So she just kept running to the fence of the ghetto by herself in the night, and she found a little area under the fence and went under, tore her nightgown, hurt her leg, and kept running as the bullets were flying past her head, and made her way to about 10 miles to a farm outside of her town. And she knew the farmers, they weren't Jewish. She knocked on the door and they said, "We can't keep you here. Go out into the woods." And she did. And there's many stories, but she did survive. They found out that her sister had also done the same thing. And about 6 weeks later, the farmers had brought them together, and they lived in the woods in the winter, going back and forth to the farmhouse. And when I spoke to her about it and all the stories that came out of it, she could not believe that it was actually her life. My father, on the other hand, was in the Lodz ghetto. During the liquidation, he was sent to Auschwitz to the labor camp. And while there, they asked people to come forward if they had special skills. Well, my father's family happened to be fairly well-to-do. They had cars and motorcycles. And the question was, does anybody here know how to work on cars? Does anybody know how to drive and ride a motorcycle? Well, my father and his brother stepped forward, and you never know what small, insignificant thing can save your life. And they said, yes, we know how to work on cars, we can drive, and they became chauffeurs and mechanics for the SS. So although the conditions were very bad, and you've heard all the stories about the barracks and everything that went along with it, they were able to get extra food and a little bit better treatment, and that's how they survived. And left here, and the story continued with the struggle of relocating to the United States and starting over. I was born, they met, I was born several years later, and they were blessed once again. They bought a chicken farm, and it was not an easy life, but they were able to start over, and one day they got a knock at the door. It was the New York State Thruway Department. They needed our farm to build part of the New York Thruway. So that gave them their start. And if you remember the show Green Acres with Jaja and Ava, that was my mother and my aunt on the chicken farm. And that gave them their start. And I grew up speaking Yiddish and Polish, and they just wanted us to speak English and become, Americanized. But in growing up, the stories and the people that I was surrounded with were all survivors. And I did not like it as a child, but today, and as I've grown up, I could not be more proud. And I again, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share our stories, to share the information about next generations. And we have board members from Next Generation, our new president, and friends of ours, so I welcome you and thank you so much for coming. They're like family. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To round out the end of the program, I'm going to ask Buki Erblich to please come up and to give us a rendition of the Kel Moli Rachamim to commemorate those who were lost in the Shoah. Afterwards, I will read it in English, and we will conclude with a singing of Avatikot. I just want to remind everybody, this may be a little bit of a different program than you've seen in the past for Yom Hashoah, but as time changes and as time passes, there are different ways that we remember and we commemorate, and we commit the memory to memory, that which the Shoah was and is. And if it is to remain in our hearts, of course we remember the horror and the terror that was actually the focus of our program last year, but we also have to look to where the Holocaust has to continue to fit in a changing world and in a changing society. And that was our program this evening, a little bit of tribute of what was, a little bit of a tribute of what is, and hopefully a reminder of what is still to come as we remember over the coming years. Baruch.
Worship me.
O God, full of mercy, who dwells on high, provide a proper rest upon the divine presence of wings, that the range of the holy, pure, and glorious is shining resemble the skies. For the souls of the 6 million Jews, victims of the European Holocaust, who were murdered, slaughtered, burnt, and exterminated for the sanctification of the name by the Nazi assassins and their helpers, and the rest of the people, for that we say a prayer for the rising of their souls. Therefore the Master of Mercy will protect them from forever under his wings, and will tie their souls with the rope of life. God is their province, the Garden of Eden shall be their resting room, and their rights will stand for Israel for the rest of days. Amen. Madam Rosen, Thank you for coming, everybody, this evening. We're now going to invite everybody who wants to daven.